Tonight's workshop is about tempering the heart to master peace and happiness. So what does this actually mean? Tempering the heart is actually at the very core of Shaolin Chan or Zen, wisdom and philosophy. And it means that your emotions do not go too high, rise too high, or fall too low. You keep it fairly even. Okay? This is a very difficult thing to do. But tonight's workshop, I'll try my best to guide you through it, is a bit sensitive because we have to talk about emotions. I need to have you go back into your memories and bring back maybe some emotions that you don't want to deal with or it's been hidden for a while, or maybe strong emotions that you want to deal with. And so my job is to do that, but try to do that in a way that doesn't create a lot of emotions for you, because then it's hard to think clearly when that happens. So if it does happen for you, just find a quiet place to take a break and then resume when you can, because we do want you to stay and then ask questions and challenge the things that we say here, or that I say here. Now, what I can promise to you tonight is that if you do grasp what I say, you will take a giant leap forward tonight along your, what I call the spiritual journey. If, however, you become emotional, maybe angry with me, agitated, then that means that you did not receive the teaching properly, and it's my fault. Okay, so I'll try my best to be very careful with my words, and so please do bear with me for tonight. And we will proceed with caution, and the best way to start is with meditation to help calm our mind. So let us begin. Now let's talk about, after our meditation, let's now talk about this tempering the heart. Is it important? Okay, so yes, this topic is important. Many events of life can create certain emotions that are pretty negative, like sadness and anger and jealousy, causing depression, anxiety, and stress. And all this will generate suffering, either for you or for other people around you. But on the flip side is also true. If you experience high emotions of joy or excitement, euphoria, this too can also create suffering for you and for other people around you. So in order to be able to progress tonight, not everybody has read about or reviewed the materials about the emotions and how they work. So I will give you now a quick summary of that so that we're all on the same page. All right, let's talk about emotions then. Emotions, what are emotions? So you can say that emotions are actually a physical sensation that is related to chemicals released in the body. And this can be stimulated by your mind or by other external factors. And there's really two components of emotions. One is the emotional state. That's the actual physical feeling, that chemical release. The other is emoting, which is a way of communication. How we, if we're angry, we clench our jaw, we open our eyes a little bit more intensely. For example, we're trying to communicate either to ourselves or to other people. So with this in mind, then we have a better appreciation of how emotions work. And then we can start talking about something called emotional holes. And emotional holes is an idea that is really the center of tonight's topic. It's kind of an analogy that I'll be using to help you to understand what emotional holes are and how to actually get out of it using the idea of like a ladder, for example. So I'm going to help you to identify if you are in one, and then how to build that ladder smartly and patiently to get out of it. What are emotional holes? Basically, an emotional hole is an abstract representation of a perceptual layer, a complex perceptual layer that forms from an experience with strong emotions. So if you were here in the last workshop or previous workshops where I talked about perceptual holes or perceptual belief holes, it's almost the same. You can even say it's arbitrary to divide holes into perceptual belief holes and emotional holes, except that by doing so, we can build tools and create a structure of learning and that is a little bit more catered to the kind of perceptual layer that we want to work with. So perceptual belief holes are learned. They're knowledge-based, okay, primarily. Emotional holes come from strong emotions that are involved. So what happens is that when we are in an emotional hole, it drives our thoughts, our actions. And this can be a problem, even our speech, because it will cause suffering to ourselves and to other people. One of the things that happens is that when we feed off our emotions, just an endless string of things happen. Sometimes we don't even know we're doing things. Or maybe we're not very happy with the result of what we, for ourselves, of ourselves, and on to other people. So it's time to try to figure out what's actually going on. What is this emotional holes that we keep falling into? Why do we keep falling into this? Emotions have a way of making us blind. So we just walk in something, we're falling into a hole. Sometimes we fall into a hole, we don't even know we're in one. So we're going to explore that tonight. But in order to progress, I need you now to let your guard down. And this is very important because the examples that I'm going to give you are some examples of complex perceptual layers that will lead to an emotional hole or become an emotional hole. So I'm going to run through the list of examples. There's quite a few here. And before I begin, I got to say is that I've been in so many emotional holes. So every time I discover, I try to find a way to get out. And I only discover another one, all right? So we're only human after all. So if I'm in it, chances are you've been in it or still are in emotional holes. Okay, so here are some examples. Oppression and trauma from parents, teachers, and others that turn us into yes people. Wanting approval from others. Fear of losing a loved one. Losing a loved one. Fear of being poor. Being poor and starving. Fear of being a lower-class citizen. Being a lower-class citizen. Fear of rejection from a social group or people you care about. Being rejected by a social group or person you care about. Coveting what others have. Desiring excess excitement and euphoria. That's for the younger people, by the way. Okay. Desiring excess satisfaction. Desiring excess comfort. In each of these examples, you'll be driven to spend your time and energy appeasing your own desires. That's what happens as a result of these emotional holes. It might even lead you to control other people. Okay, ultimately, this will result in suffering for yourself and other people around you. So chances are, this is not an exhaustive list by any means. I just tried to think about the most common types of or reasons why people will fall into these emotional holes. If you are a human and you live life here, you must be in a hole, by definition, okay? Unless you've already worked on yourself and you got out of that hole. So, let your guard down. Think about it. Are maybe many of these will describe things that you've experienced recently. The good news is that if you are humble and you accept it, you'll be able to move on You'll take full advantage of what I'm going to say tonight, and it's going to be very, very liberating for you. So what we're going to do now is take a 5-minute break. During this 5-minute break, I mentioned that we will do a quiet contemplation exercise. So I want you to ask yourself now, are you in a hole? Maybe you're in multiple holes, but choose one hole that you want to use as an exercise for tonight. Okay, so let's start with the 5-minute break. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Section of this philosophy talk is now about how to deal with emotional holes. And the very first step, we're going to talk about two of 3 steps. Okay, I'm going to save the final step for the last session. And the first step is about humility, awareness, and recognition. So basically, you can say that emotional holes, they arise from an illogical evaluation of where you want to be and where you really are. There's a disconnect. So I'm going to use some example. Again, these will be maybe a little bit sensitive, all right? So I want, if you happen to fall into one of these categories of examples, try to breathe and relax, okay? Try not to let your emotions go up and down. Something called the skill of calmness, which we'll cover again in a moment. So here's the first example. When a person you care about passes away, often unexpectedly, and this just happened to me last week, you may become very sad and then eventually depressed. This is because you want a reality where the person is still in it. Obviously, that person cannot be in your reality anymore. But this causes you to suffer from feelings related to loss. The second example I have is you may have experienced trauma from your parents who punished you for not behaving in a way that they want. For instance, you get punished either physically or verbally for not getting good grades, not doing your chores, etc. You want a reality where no one punishes you, so you can do whatever you want. The greater the punishment, the more trauma and fear you develop. So unless you are living alone in some seclusion, you really can't do whatever you want. Okay, and there's people around you in an environment, things like that you have to respect. 3, hunger can be a disturbing feeling. The more hungry you are, the more disturbing it gets. So you want a reality where you're never hungry. So over time, you eat more and more, and then you suffer from being overweight. Now, you can apply this idea to many other emotions, such as anything that gives you kind of discomfort, maybe even unsatisfied sex drive. You can think about your situation. So how do people actually deal with emotional holes that causes suffering? That means if you didn't have the know-how, what would happen? Well, first of all, it's very sneaky because you can find yourself in an emotional hole without ever realizing you're even in one, and then, which is what this tonight's workshop is about. Try to figure out if you are. But what I'll say is that, my observations here, people who have been oppressed since childhood will likely seek power. People who have been traumatized will seek to control their environment and others. People who are poor growing up will seek to make more money than they really need for a comfortable life. So a lot of such people, and this may be you to some extent, maybe not such an extreme extent, will spend a lot of time and effort and energy to try to achieve these never-ending goals. And they're never satisfied. So they will sacrifice themselves or other people, act selfishly in order to achieve these never-ending goals and thus cause suffering around them. Many don't even realize that they are doing so, or maybe they'll deny it, or they just can't bring themselves to think about that. So the question then becomes, how does humility help us to become aware of emotional holes? Well, since I described these people in a more extreme case, the suffering we still create is not going to be as great. Not all of us are trying to take over an entire country and rule the whole country and control everybody. But a classic example would be, another example here is, because I know a lot of people, like myself, grew up with very strict parents. So this actually applies to a lot of people. That's why I use this example. But in order to pass down teaching such as good manners, being well behaved, doing chores, doing well in school, your parents may have been very strict with you, giving you physical and mental punishment. The harsher your punishment, the more likely you will pass this on to your children. That is because being controlled through fear tactic by your parents will naturally make you want to control others in order to alleviate the suffering that you yourself have been harboring. Okay, also, if you learn life that way, you're more likely to pass it on that way. So, of course, it's not always the case. Some people have a very passionate vow to do the opposite. They say, I suffer like this, forget it. I don't want my kids to suffer like this. But you can see both sides, and around you, it can go either way. Humility gives us time to introspect, honestly examine our lives and our experiences to determine if we are in an emotional hole. But if we don't have such humility, we cannot even get to that point of observing to see if we are in one. So how do you recognize that you are in one? As I thought and pondered about this very question, I realized some people may reject the idea immediately. It's the ego self goes, forget it, I'm not in one. So if you're getting that reaction, chances are you are in one. Because there's no harm in considering that you are in one. The worst case is that you're going to learn something to get out of it and become aware of it. There's no harm. If you're not in one, then you're fine. Because tonight, as we discuss and explore more ideas, you'll gradually determine the kind of holes that you may be in, and also learn how to characterize them succinctly, very precisely, so then you can work on them. Now, here are some examples of questions that you can ask to see if you're actually in an emotional hole. So this is you yourself now. Are you, I'm going to ask it in my own personal point of view, right? Am I trying to control somebody? That is, also includes manipulation. Are you trying to manipulate how the person thinks to your own benefit for what you want, to appease your desires? Am I in a depressed state? Do I get angry easily or often? Do I feel jealous often or have strong feelings of jealousy? Do I understand the emotions that I am experiencing? This is actually really good. I don't know about today, the kids for today, but growing up, this is something that is kind of shunned for guys especially. Don't think about your emotions. You're weak, you know. All sorts of things. Right? So, of course, later on when you learn to wisen up a little bit, you start realizing it's important to understand what your emotions are. And that's what one of the workshops that we've done was talking about emotions, why they're important, how do we use them. So it's something that if you want to learn more about emotions, how they work for you, please read up on that blog. Here's another question. Do I feel I need to make lots of money and it's never enough? I know people like this. Do I often feel anxious, stressed, or scared? Am I putting a lot of effort and time to be happy? Am I overweight or have unhealthy lifestyle habits? Do I have a lot of regrets? Okay, so these are all indicators. It doesn't mean that you are in one, but it's a strong indication. The more that you say yes, the more likely you are in an emotional hole. Another way to think about emotional holes is to ask yourself, what is motivating your actions today? What are you doing today? What's the drive behind it? And if you're not sure, probably you're feeding off emotions. You're just acting because there's an underlying emotion that you're trying to fulfill, or it's driving you to do something. But I'll give you another example, because I think examples are very, very good to help understand things. And let's say you are working several jobs, because again, I know many people are working several jobs. But you're doing it because you want to afford things that are considered luxury items, like an expensive car, expensive computer, a big house. Okay, now there may be strong feelings of jealousy or loss associated with this idea, but you're not sure. You just want those items. But once you obtain that luxury item, what happens is that you'll move on to another. Without honest introspection, you will spend most of your life working to acquire more and more material things. One day you will surely ask yourself, where did all my time just go? You may suffer from regret, health issues, or even feelings of anger. So how do I then characterize the emotional holes that I'm in? So here's a four-step process, okay? So if you're describing an emotional hole, you need to consider four things. One is, what are the emotions that you are currently feeling? What is the source of those emotions, and where is it coming from? A lot of people haven't gotten there yet. Maybe they feel anxious or stressed, but they don't know why. Or maybe they have an idea, and they tried working on it, but it hasn't helped. It means that you need to look more. You need to look further. What are the actions? What are you doing as a result of these emotions? And then how are you or other people suffering from your actions? So I'll give you some time to think about it, because during the break I said, are you actually in some holes? How can you characterize it? Now you may discover you're in multiple holes. So try to find one in particular where it makes sense, where all these, because you might be feeling 10 different emotions, but what is commonality behind 3 or 4 of the strongest emotions, for example? Try to keep things a little bit more simple so you can start thinking about and then describing it. Now, I don't have time to go through all the examples, but you will find lots of examples on the blog that I'll post maybe in about a week. I need a little bit more time because this topic is so complicated. I want to provide even more examples, and I think this will help a lot of people. Okay, so here's a common one. I feel lonely because I have no one to talk to. And this causes me to spend a lot of time and effort to be accepted by friends and social groups that are not really right for me. And this causes a lot of anxiety and stress. Now, other variations could be loneliness coming from the feeling that you just don't even belong in society. I've got students who are like this, and I help them through it. Rejection and isolation by others, observing other people in a great relationship, being ignored by people that you cared about. These are little variations of holes that can then drive you to do things and say things that maybe don't really make sense, but you haven't had time to think it through. I'm going to give you another example here. I just want to try to vary up these examples, because I talked about that. Okay, here's a good one here. I feel regret for many things I have done because I feel the results would have been better had I chosen a different path. Because this is a topic that does come up frequently in many of our workshops. People who feel regret. I have a whole article about regret. Now, the source of this is generally you want to covet a life that you observe in other people and you perceive it to be better. So that's where regret comes from. Let's say a lot of the regret comes from this. Oh, I want that. But I didn't make the decision in life that allows me now to get it. So for example, I made a poor decision in school and with poor grades, I didn't care at the time. Now I really regret it because I can't make the money I want, for example. And I see other people with nice big houses or whatever. So those are sources of regret. So what happens is that the feeling gets triggered and then you suffer mentally. And maybe you feel sad or disappointed, maybe in yourself. Then what happens when you do that? You start to lash out at other people. And that causes suffering for other people, not just you now. Now you're causing suffering to other people. Okay, so I have many other examples, but I want you to take the time now to think through your emotions. See if you can characterize your emotional hole that you may be in. I'm not saying you are in one, but you might be in. It's just really fun. Actually, I had a lot of fun doing this, uncovering so many holes that I've been in. It actually gets really fun. And later on, I'll explain that. It'll make more sense later on, all right, why I say that. So I want you to kind of get excited. I'm discovering. Because this is going to drive you to keep doing it and find a way to get out of them. So try to characterize it And then, because we're going to take a short break in just a moment, I have one more thing I want to talk about, because dealing with emotions does require a second step. And that's, I mentioned briefly earlier, it means developing your skill of calmness. So what is this? Well, skill of calmness is basically 3 parts. We worked on, and this comes from a previous workshop, by the way, we work on acceptance scenarios. This helps us to prepare for unexpected things in life. Okay? As you get older, surely there's a limit to our age. People will pass away. But if you accept it, when it happens, you're less likely to get really sad about it. In fact, you end up honoring them and appreciating them when they do, because they had a great life, for example. Okay? Daily silent meditation, we're doing that now. Can you do that every single day, even for a couple of minutes? Okay? It will help greatly so that you can become a calmer person. And then finally, this is a bit strange if you haven't done this with me, and that is practice awareness of arising emotional states. So that means you purposely create an emotional state in yourself, either joy or anger or sadness, through a memory. But you observe it as it happens. Okay? So this helps you to understand how you work better. In fact, if you really get good at it, you'll be able to determine the emotional state before it even happens. Okay? And then you can deal with it and therefore become a calmer person. Okay, so the way I like to look at it is that when you successfully recognize that you are in an emotional hole, it's like being at the very bottom looking up and going, what do I do now? Okay, that's when you recognize it. The skill of calmness is about how quickly and how efficiently you can build a ladder to get out. Okay, so that's what the skill of calmness is. So if you're going to have a problem later on getting out of this hole, then it means you need to work on these 2 things. Okay, so we're going to take a 5-minute break. I'm going to take my own break this time. So I'll come back in about 5 minutes. So once again, ponder. Are you in an emotional hole? How would you characterize it? Finally, we get to talk about getting out of this hole, because we're standing at the very bottom of it. And we're saying, how do we build this ladder to get out? So the important thing is that when you are ready to work on this ladder, you need to reaffirm your understanding of the whole. So that means if you're working on it every single day, then every single day you need to reaffirm, because you need to make sure that that whole is what you think it is. Now, one way of looking at it is that the whole can be really big or really small. The size is determined by how many perceptual layers that you have related to this emotional whole. So if you have many, it's bigger. Then there's the depth. How deep does this hole go? Or how deep is the hole that you are in? This now represents the effort that you must put into getting out of the hole. So the stronger your emotions are related to perceptual layers that you have, and the more of these that you have will determine how deep the hole is. Now, that's a very important part because it keeps you calm. It says you look at the situation and say, it might take 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. Okay? So, for example, let's give you an example. A loved one passes away unexpectedly, but you've already accepted it. You know that person cannot live forever. Okay? So it's a pretty big scar, okay? Because that person has been with you. And so they're not there with you, but you still feel this sense of loss. It's going to take some time. Why is this the case? Because it's not just the memory or just having the presence that's gone. It's all the memories you've ever had with this person that are positive or negative that's contributing to this whole. Okay, so I'm not suggesting you get rid of these memories. It's learning how to deal with them. And that's going to be very important. So these emotions or these memories, okay, that you have that you want to work on, okay, these are what I call the rungs of the ladder. Okay? So those are what you actually climb on. They're called the rungs of the ladder. I'll talk about that in a moment. So that means that you're going to have to build a really long ladder to get out of this one. Okay? It's going to take a lot of effort because those emotions are very, very strong based on many, many, many memories. But it's not so big because you recognize, okay, that you've already accepted it. Okay? But you have a lot of memories associated with it. So it's not too small, but say medium size, but it goes pretty deep. You have to think about it in this way, and this will help you, again, plan your escape, essentially. The other thing is that once you can characterize it, and this part is a lot harder than it might seem, you have to then ask yourself, do you actually want to get out of it? Okay, the reason why it's not so easy, because you might say, oh yeah, of course I want to get out of it. But when you are emotional, you're sad or depressed, you can't make that decision very easily. Okay, so that means it's now up to you to generate that passion. Okay, you keep looking at how you characterize the emotional hole that you're in. How do you then figure out yourself? You have to figure out how to generate an even greater passion, okay, even stronger emotion to say, I do have to get out of this hole. I must get out of this hole. Okay? Once you can do that, then you're ready. Before that, you can't build the ladder. You're not ready yet. Okay? So take your time. Think things through. Try to work on the skill of calmness, because these things will help you prepare yourself and build this ladder. Start it sooner and build it more efficiently. So let's talk about then, how do we create the rung? Okay? So this is actually, the way to think about it is that the rung, the material, okay, instead of wood, you might need metal. You might need something stronger. So now you have to put a lot more effort to obtain or create this rung. So the rung is a representation of the strong emotion that you have related to a perceptual layer. So you need to spend some time introspecting, having a quiet time, thinking about what are the memories that come up that give you the strongest, that you feel is contributing to this whole. Okay? So you're going to probably have a few of them. And sometimes it's very sneaky. You may not even realize until maybe a couple days later. Okay? So don't rush through this process. You need to think about it. So I thought about 5 different possibilities. These 2 are pretty strong. But as you're thinking about that, it might suddenly uncover a much greater one, a hidden perceptual layer. And you say, whoa, that one I feel strongly about. Okay? So when you can finally realize what that perceptual layer is, and again, you may have to refer back to one of the workshops about perceptions, because that will help you to characterize these perceptual layers. Then you say, all right, now I know how much effort I need, how big or strong this rung needs to be. So you create this rung now. You have this idea of a very strong memory or perceptual layer with a specific emotion, which again could be positive or negative. Okay? It doesn't have to be negative. Even positive can contribute to a whole emotional hole that causes suffering. Then you say, how do I now install it? How to put this and secure it onto the ladder so when I step on it, it doesn't break? Right? Yeah, a very, very important question, and that needs an answer. So you need to test it. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example. Okay, so what we're trying to do here is, while we're calm, to examine this perceptual layer that you've chosen for this rung in such a way that you can accept it. Really, the key word is now acceptance for one memory, just one memory. How can you accept it so it becomes a neutral memory? Or how do we accept it so it becomes a positive one? Okay, so this is going to require some experience and skill. You need to experiment to figure out what works for you. When you can do it, and that means from a state of calm, think about this memory, and it no longer elicits a strong emotional state. Even better, barely any emotional state or none at all. When you can get to that point, you're ready to install it, and you'll know when the time is right, that you can trust it and then move on to the next memory or rung. Now, I'll give you an example here. Let's go back to one of the examples that we've mentioned in different ways. So let's say your partner or loved one has passed away. You can now accept it because you realize that no one can live forever. People around you must and will pass away eventually due to health issues, reaching the age limit, or even a seemingly random reason. It is not in your control. This is life. That means death is in fact natural. Okay? And we need to embrace and honor all the natural events of life. So you ask yourself, would my partner want me to be depressed or find a way to live happily? You realize that you must move on and find a way to live happily. You need to figure out, how do you change your perspective about a situation, a memory? And so this one refers to the death. But there will be other memories. For example, alluded to earlier, you may have many fond memories. But when you think about that, it makes you sad because the person's not there anymore. So now you have to work on each one. Each rung has to be, let's work on this most amazing time that we've had. And let's now accept that that was an amazing time. It's now in the past. But it's still with you. You haven't lost it. The person is no longer there, but that memory is still very real and alive. Okay? And it's still great, regardless of the situation. This is just an example. You need to figure out how to think about it in a way that logically makes sense. So effectively, what you're trying to do is detach that emotional state from the perceptual layer. Now it becomes a perceptual belief, or just a regular, complex perceptual layer. That's what happens when you do it successfully. If, in thinking about that perceptual layer and the emotion or the memory, still creates strong emotional state, it means you're not ready yet. So you need to spend more time. Again, there's no rush. In fact, the more time you spend on it and ensuring that you're ready is actually less time overall to get out of the hole. So instead of 10 years, now it's only 2 years. It's not going to be a short time. Okay? The stronger or bigger, deeper the hole, the more time that it will take. So it's very important not to get frustrated. Be real about the situation. That's why I ask you every single time you're ready to work on yourself, you need to re-examine the ladder, reaffirm the hole that you are in, reaffirm how deep you are in. Okay? How much more work does it take to get out of it? As long as you're doing that, you can maintain calm. It's realistic. If you want to get out of it now, it's not realistic. You'll not be calm. It doesn't make sense. It's not logical. Too much pressure as well. Okay? You don't want to have that pressure. So if you follow this advice and you build one rung at a time, eventually you'll get to the top of the hole. And you'll be able to peer outside the hole for the first time. And you'll see what the real world actually is like. Not only that, you'll be able to say, wow, I really was in a hole. I look down and go, ooh, that was a really deep one. That was really tough to get out of. When you can do that, you can consider a kind of enlightenment. We use this word to mean like a sudden epiphany, like a sudden greater understanding of reality, of you yourself. If you can achieve that, then now, finally, you take the final step. And you will absolutely feel liberated when you get there. So this I tell you from experience. So for sure you're in holes. If you just take any hole as an example and you work on it, when you get there, you'll see what I mean. That liberation is amazing. Because once you get out of it, then you get excited. What other holes am I in? I want to discover them all. Now, again, you don't want to get lost in this idea. But it's really easy. Are you feeling emotion that you don't understand where it's coming from, or an emotion that you cannot resolve? Then you must be in an emotional hole. So you can, if you're living life pretty calmly, then probably you're either not in a serious hole or maybe it's not really affecting your life. It doesn't matter. So you don't have to go actively searching for them per se. But it's when you suddenly feel these emotions that you don't understand. That's the time to slow things down and look around you. Are you actually in a hole? So the final thing I want to say right now is, in the beginning, tempering your heart is a very strange idea. Because, I just live life, I just go with the flow. I have my ups, I have my downs. And maybe you may be experiencing such trauma that it seems impossible to not go through emotional roller coasters. But now I've given you a tool now that you apply that I promise you'll get out of the hole and feel liberated in this way. And I spent actually now accumulation of many years to come up with this idea to finally relate it in a way that I think makes a lot of sense. Maybe you come with an even better analogy. I'm not saying it's the best way, but I think it is a great way that can work. So give it a try. But once you escape, that means I will allude to the fact that once you escape from one hole, it means that you're already climbing out of an even bigger one. There are such massive holes, like we're standing in the middle of a crater. You don't even know, right? And that crater, you might have a whole city inside that crater. You don't even know you're standing inside one. But that means that you have to put hard work and be vigilant about this. And it is worth it. I tell you from personal experience, it is worth it. It'll also contribute to you being a calmer person, accepting things as they come. But it also makes you a hardworking person to, in a sense, become like a warrior to fight in life, because you can't just simply accept the things that happen so easily. Your fate, we'll always say, the fate is in your hands. You have to decide what your life is going to be. And in doing so, and the main point of all of this, again, tempering the heart, is to bring you back to your spiritual journey, to allow you to continue along it. Otherwise, you'll spend your whole entire life feeding off your emotions, and then on the final day, you'll be saying, I wish I had not done this. I regret it a lot. Where did all my time go? Okay, so I'm going to give you quickly what I call the Shaolin Chandao perspective. I'm going to read this now. It is very important to embrace the emotions we have and not to ignore them. This is what makes us human, after all. In this way, we can manage life better and live fully without causing undue suffering to others. 阿弥陀佛。